All right. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. This is Laura Gray with Drug Free Sport. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today on marijuana, new trends and consequences of use today. We've got a great presentation lined up. This is actually a continuation of our marijuana session that took place at our 2016 Sport Exchange Summit. So we're happy to welcome our speakers back. A few administrative things to get out of the way is for those of you on the call that are in need of continuing education for the Board of Certification Certified Athletic Trainers, please understand that I do need you to complete the evaluation feedback form at the end of the webinar and receive that in order to issue you a continuing education certificate. So please make sure that you do participate for the full webinar and are able to submit an evaluation. If you have any questions during the webinar, please make sure that you use the questions toolbar in GoToWebinar, and we'll be screening those and asking those during the production of the webinar to our speakers. And in addition to that, if you have any questions or are having trouble troubleshooting the webinar at any time, you can either use the question toolbar or email me directly at lgray, G-R-A-Y, at drugfreesport.com. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers, Dr. LaTisha Bader and Ben Cort with CeDAR, which is a subunit of the University of Colorado Hospital System. Welcome, Dr. Bader and Ben.
Hello, everybody out there in Cyberland. So we are kind of aware that we're going to have a mixed audience today, and so we're going to be a little dorky and kind of start from the beginning and reintroduce ourselves so we make new friends, and then we'll kind of quickly cover the material that if you were at the conference you heard it, so as not to bore you guys, and then get into questions. Because I think that's what we're going to, your questions are going to pop up, so if you have something pertinent to where we're at in the presentation, feel free. Laura's going to do a good job of filtering them through, but we'll try to ask them in the moment so that it can be a little bit interactive. So I'm LaTisha, Dr. Bader. I'm from CeDAR. I run the professionals program there at CeDAR, and I think more important to most of you people out there, the elite athlete track. So yeah. It's tough to get athletes into treatment, and we're going to focus on kind of the #1 reason why today, educate you a little bit about marijuana. Ben's going to do a lot of the education. He's like our, I call him, he's my trophy presenter, and because you can't be on screen, he's also some arm candy, so just know that. Like, it's a good-looking face to look at when you're talking about weed. So we're going to learn a little bit today from him as the Colorado scene is ever-changing, and then we're going to talk athletes a little bit, and then try to help you guys have some honest interventions with your people. Okay, so that's me, and here's Ben.
Hey, so I get to work with Dr. Bader in a number of different areas at CeDAR, but my real focus is the marijuana issue. I'm on the administrative team at CeDAR, but I spend a lot of my time thinking weed. I'm on the board of directors for an organization called SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. It's a bipartisan group of folks that has been advocating for science-based law when it comes to cannabis for quite some time. And I think about this a whole lot, so I got no letters after my name or kind of nothing that distinguishes me aside from being a guy in recovery. I get sober June 15th, 1996, and living in Colorado and raising 3 children in Colorado. So kind of that perspective of being in treatment, at a hospital, having kids in the state, and then paying real close attention to what goes on from a policy, but also from a practical application standpoint, is about the only credentials that I've got. So when you've got issues with any of the studies or smart stuff that we say here, you have to get mad at Dr. Bader because she's she's the brains. Nice. I'm just here to tell you what's in the papers.
And mine is that I wish we could be doing research so that we could give you much better studies, and we're going to talk about those studies. But what I get to share is a little bit of the front lines for the clinical work. The admissions that have come in this year are pretty ridiculous. and we can answer some questions about that as we get to it, specifically on the psychosis slide. So without further ado, we'll kind of get into it. So for you visual learners, we've just put a slide presentation behind it. You might have seen a couple of it before, but we're just going to talk a little about today's weed and the difference. If you're new to weed, we'll educate you a little bit. Hopefully, we won't get to see the nonverbals, but we usually have people's mouth agape by about 20 minutes of what's happening. Ben and I are living both here in Colorado in the biggest social experiment known to man, I think, when it comes to this, and so we'll give you our anecdotal information and what we're seeing already in inpatient treatment. So talk a little bit about marijuana and mental health. That's usually, I think you guys are on the front lines of it, and then some research, and then we're going to talk athletes as well, hoping that that's a target population for the people that are out there. So this is my slide. I laugh as, why am I even here? Why am I listening? What does it matter? It's actually kind of your due diligence. If you're in the sport world, the NCAA tells us that we have to stay on top of things. We got to be aware of the current trends in drug abuse and drug use. So that doesn't mean like come visit us here in Colorado and try an edible for the first time, although somebody suggested that once. But it's to know what is out there in the sport world and to know what's out there for your athletes and to stay abreast of it, because the weed from our generations or the generations above is gone. So here we go. So that's the first slide. We just know is kind of know your athletes, and this. We've been listening to you guys when you've emailed us after the presentations, and I've had a lot of people in athletics mostly send me their drug policy of like, and consult me at midnight of like, what do I tell this kid, because this is what's happening and it's normal for them, and now they're on campus here. And so I think that's just for duty number one, is just know your athletes, know what they can get their hands on. Ben and I joke, we look like creepers on the college campus sometimes. Our CU magazine is called The Rooster, and it's a really well-printed magazine, but it lets you know quickly what they're able to get their hands on, what the kind of, Ben calls it the Hearts and Minds campaign of how they're trying to change the beliefs about marijuana. And Ben reads, he's a prolific reader and a writer. We're going to share that at the end. Because if you can't get enough Ben Cort, then you're going to get him in print. He wrote a book. So it's just that, to know your environment, know what's around, and if you're in places where you go, oh, it's illegal here, yeah, they have it already. So it's already made it to your town, whether it's legal or not. So know your athletes, and we're going to know your weed now, and Ben's going to do a lot of the talking.
What Dr. Bader said there just couldn't be more true. I think a lot of us kind of weigh our own experiences when we're considering what's going on with kids today, and it's really difficult not to view the world through the construct of our own experience and background. But it's just a different time and place, and when we had high times when I was a kid, and it was about the coolest thing in the world to get a copy of one of those, and you could look in the back and like, crap, look, they actually are selling bongs out of LA, you can order that. This is different now. You've got probably most of your campus publications are going to have recipes for things, and lots of news that's going to come from a pretty specific perspective, and that specific perspective is a Hearts and Minds campaign, because the premise that I operate under here, and Linda will share a little bit more, is that this is considerably less about social justice, about freedom, about righting the crazy, ridiculous, racist laws of the 18th century, and much more about big business getting into our pockets, but a somewhat jaded Gen X American, I think I've kind of thought that from the beginning. They're all trying to get into our pockets. So here's a couple of nice things for you. Screenshot, you guys, I don't know if they get a copy of this at the end, Laura, but whatever. Here's a couple of decent resources for you. One of the things that I hear all the time is, well, the jury's still out on this, and there's not science, and we don't actually know the answer. We actually have a ton of really good science, and more coming. My new project now, moving more over to the University of Colorado Hospital and away from the treatment program that we have to build a marijuana dashboard, which is something that we are hoping to use to kind of catalog and present all of the research and all of the data that's out there. So these are a couple of the ones that I thought were interesting, and if you know nothing, they're good places to start. Number 2, you'll see Dr. Volkoff, who I think I misspelled that. She published a meta-study in the New England Journal of Medicine 2 years ago. So it's a really nice place to go to find a good summary of everything that's going on. Number 3 is, I think, the most timely and impactful science that there is to date on this subject. So we'll review that in a moment. It's incredibly important, and it's one that, again, even if you're coming into this, how I was at the beginning of this conversation, 4 years ago, like, yeah, what's the big deal? It's just weed. Even if you're on the other end of this computer thinking that this study in the Lancet Journal should be something that catches your attention and probably gets you to perk up a little bit. One of the big issues in Colorado is that we didn't have any centralized mechanism for data collection, and there certainly was no repository to put that information in. One of the things, I'm not a scientist, but one of the things that I'm pretty sure about is experiments are done on totally willing populations and outcomes are tracked. The outcomes were not tracked. So you've got a couple of different places who are trying to gather data, but it's piecemeal right now. That's why we're trying to do it through the hospital. So these are good places to start. The Rocky Mountain HIDA report, so they're actually releasing version 4 next month. And then the very first state-sponsored one that we have is below that. It's number 5, marijuana legalization in Colorado. So let me just caution you that there's quite a bit of spin typically associated with these things because there's so many political fortunes being made and lost, and just real tangible fortunes being made in this. So use a subjective eye when you're a critical eye. Use a critical eye when you're looking at this and thinking about this stuff, and know that real science is journal published in peer-reviewed places. It's not something that we read in a blog, and so it absolutely must be true. I think it's high time we started demanding that the science around THC, CBD, cannabis, marijuana was as sort of rigorously presented as it is on everything else, and that's a peer-reviewed journal published.
So when we talk about it, just for Weed 101, he's kind of tossing it over to me, but these are the basics, and this is where we talk about having kind of a 2-minute elevator speech because you're going to lose them really quickly. So if you're one of those prolific readers and you've just downloaded all of the articles that have been introduced and you're reading them and you have this great cut it down and cut it down and cut it down. I know head coaches laugh all the time because they have these wonderful speeches and they remember about 30 seconds of them. And so just kind of Weed 101, knowing the truth. It's the most illicit used drug in the nation, even though we've legalized it. I think the numbers are still running the same, and millions and millions of users. Monitoring the future is another one that's comes through, lets you know how much the kids are gaining access to it, and the numbers are growing by just hand over fist when they talk about it. The New Zealand study is the one that that you see. That's the one that people started talking about. It's probably the longest longitudinal.
I've got 30 years so far.
Yeah, so they started it a while back, and they were proving that individuals were losing significant IQ points. They ranged it in the 8 to 10 now whenever they added the extra 5 years to it. And again, it doesn't sound like much, but just to know that in some countries, like a 3-point IQ loss is a national crisis. And an 8 to 10 point is like going from UCLA to like JUCO. And that's kind of one of the things, if you're talking eligibility and smarts, these are huge points for chronic users. And somebody kind of talked to me, what's a regular user? And that we'll show you later what a regular user.
JUCO college?
Junior college.
Oh. I hope there's no one from JUCO on here.
Junior colleges. And it would be hard to stay eligible even at that level. So
one of the things that this New Zealand study has done, and there's a few others, but one of the really interesting things about studies around this is the absolute need for them to be longitudinal. I was literally starting to get phone calls from the media. I do a bit on that side of things. The day after we opened up retail stores, and I said, so what's going on? How bad is it? What's happening out there? My goodness, you guys, it's not going to happen that quickly. Like, we have a long period of time with THC, with cannabis, where you sort of start to see detrimental effects typically. So following some of these studies that are tracking their cohort over multiple years is proving to be very, very interesting. But what we're starting to see is kind of a lot of studies that started when this whole debate got really hot and heavy that are now now they're 5 years in. So we're sort of seeing first response to them, and we got to keep an eye on those things because typically it continues to grow.
And we're rolling over, like our hospital's doing a lot of research, and so the things that we can start to see trending, though, is like ER visits, overdose, children involved,
neonatal
exposure, veterinarians. One of the byproducts that we didn't think about for legalization, industrialization, is that our veterinarians also are trying to figure out how to do overdoses in dogs because they'll get into the edibles and don't process them the same way. So fun fact for that. So this is going to be your first one. It's one of the myths, is that marijuana is not addictive. And they'll come in and say it's of the earth and come up with all kinds of, as they're wearing their Bob Marley shirts, or that could actually date me, their oil shirts, and say it's not a big deal. It's not addictive. And so you'll have numbers in front of you, and the statistics are true. So contrary to common belief, so this is part of that elevator speech that we'd love for you guys to make sure that you believe when you're saying it, is that the addiction rates are there. And so that 9% of users, and it's regular users, they become addicted. It's starting to increase, so we kind of joke, as Ben would tell you, you know, if you're a fully myelinated individual around 25 or older, you know, introducing some of this into your body is not necessarily the most dangerous thing because it has regular rates of addiction. It's addictive. It has addictive potential, but we can't scare people running around that it's as addictive as some other
under 10%.
Yeah, some other drugs that are out there. However, this is talking adults, and so some of you are not working with fully myelinated people, or they don't act like it either. But the DSM clearly states now, it gives us criteria to talk about withdrawal, it gives us criteria to talk about addictive nature, and then we'll just kind of jump to it. This is probably a lot of the population too, is that they started smoking in their teens. Anecdotally, I think I shared with a couple of you guys when we were at the conference, is that we were treating some players, and literally weed was the only thing in their profile, and it kept them off the field. And oh yeah, Ben is pointing out how these studies were even in 2002, 2004, so they're early, and we knew it. Like, these are the things that we know and science is telling us. But that the onset of use for this football player was 12. Like, he'd never been sober for more than 30 days and had been smoking since he was 12 years old. And so these are the rates to know, instead of the adult rates, is 1 in 16s become addicted. So it's that, and they're using different substances than you think, of a lot of the concentrates and a lot of the oils and edibles, because they're more kid-friendly than doing it the old-fashioned way where we all sit on a couch and get high. The fact on this one too is when Ben talks about research and when people are, I printed off like what's the most popular 10 articles about weed and athletes right now, and they'll talk about they'll talk about kind of research. And so here's just for that fun fact, is even in the research studies that we're getting, because they're sort of behind the times and they do have to control it in some fashion, is that they're only getting about 12 to 16%.
Oh, absolute top. So usually quite a bit less than that.
And that's not what's on the streets. And so even when we're having those studies, when something looks not as scary or not as dangerous, just know that the percentages of the weed that they use in the research studies are still really, really low. So when you have that elevator speech of asking people what they're using and how they're using, don't forget the potency. And that's going to be a word that we'll start to use, and hopefully that'll become part of your vocabulary. So
yeah, we'll kind of get into the potency immediately next here, but I'd like you just to consider, sorry, we're fighting over the keyboard. These numbers are old. You'll see where the potency was with it, and I think we're going to expect updated in the next year or two. But you have pretty good odds that somebody who starts consuming at an early age is going to end up with some pretty significant issues associated with their use. And so this is one where I'd like you to sort of separate out your own experiences from the experiences of the men and women who you work with. Like, yeah, a lot of people had a little bit of weed in college, and a lot of people had more than a little bit of weed in college. But kind of if we consider the gentleman that Dr. Bader's talking about as a case study, I mean, this was a guy who was on the verge of losing absolutely everything, you know, full ride D1 and real potential to keep going after that. And the first 2 weeks he was with us, he really was working to explain to us how it was not addictive, even though it was in the process of taking just about everything away from him, and not just because, you know, NCAA regulations said that we had to take it away from him, because it was actually having really detrimental effects on his life. So we're going to switch slides. Keep in mind 2002, 2004, this is very interesting stuff coming up here. So those of you who've paid any attention to this issue know that there's lots and lots of different chemicals inside of the cannabis plant. The two that are the most interesting that we talk about are THC and CBD. And the reason why we're talking about them so much lately is because THC is the part of the plant that gets you high. And CBD is the part of the plant that has the most interesting potential medicinal benefits. And it looks like very real medicinal benefits, particularly for a couple of specific things, like maybe a certain type of seizure disorder, maybe spasticity associated with MS, maybe chronic wasting disease associated with AIDS, HIV, that kind of thing. So what you see here, and this is all from University of Mississippi. Sorry. This is all from the University of Mississippi, which forever has been the only place where we could actually get real information from. And fortunately, under the new guidelines that were issued last week, there's actually going to be at least another 8 sites where they can sort of research marijuana for real. So anyway, what you see at the beginning of this, when we go back to 1960 when we were measuring THC, we didn't start measuring CBD until about 1985, because that's when people started talking medicine. You see a really interesting phenomenon inside of the plant, which is about a 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD. And this is where it's like total miracle plant stuff, because CBD more or less counteracts the psychoactive components of THC. So if you're smoking or ingesting this plant at a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD and THC, you can have a really, really difficult time getting high. You'll probably feel funky from smoke inhalation before you would actually feel intoxicated from the THC. And like that's got real cool CBD has anti-inflammatory properties to it. I mean, like not nearly as good as ibuprofen or anything, but like 2,000 years ago, this was good stuff. Ingestion, salves, so you use it topically, etc. But what you see from this data is that as the average CBD has stayed the same, THC has risen. So it's very clear on this. You know, we're not going to overcomplicate this. People want to get high. And this is good botany. So between 1960 and 2010, you can see on this chart that we have grown pretty significantly in our ability to grow stronger weed. And that's just growing weed. So the big issue here and the change in the last couple of years has been the language that Dr. Bader just used, the industrialization of this product. If this were to continue on at this pace, like, okay, yes, this is probably getting worse and worse for the brain and body the stronger it gets, more than likely. But what's happened is this exponential growth has taken place as the industrialization of this substance has happened with almost no regulation associated with it. So we're going to switch slides to something kind of crazy here. So increments of 2 over the course of 50 years. This is increments of 5, you'll note, over the course of 6 years. It's really interesting because it's, okay, I'm not a researcher, never mind. Researchers say things like interesting. I say things like scary as hell because I'm a drug addict and I know how we think. Like, we like to get high and we like to get high as quickly as we can. And the interesting thing about tolerance is The more we consume something, the more we need to get the same feeling later. So what you're having now are, we just welcomed back, and all the billboards in town said, welcome CU class of 2020. So when these folks, if they were to have initiated in high school, you see that they're talking about initiating at rates that are 15, 16 plus % here, and certainly they can get much higher than that, and we're not into the concentrate section. So their reality has always been a double-digit THC potent form of marijuana. That's why when I go back to kind of some of these older studies that we have, even 2002, 2004, you have to start to wonder how antiquated those numbers are, because that was looking at people who were, 3, 4, 5% when they started. So kind of bullet point number 2 for you in your elevator talk, and when you're having this conversation with people and they tell you, hey man, it's totally natural, this is of the earth, it's a heck of a lot better than opiates, and the yes, of the earth is 0.2 to 0.5% THC. This is actually like a pretty highly synthesized
of the science.
Yeah. This is a GMO, man, and this is like a highly synthesized chemical.
Ben, I've always wanted him to overlay, and maybe he'll do it for me in his book later on, but to overlay this, because this slide looks scary enough, and it is plant-based. And so the concentrates, if you did it, yeah, the line would actually be past your computer when we're doing it. And so it's one of the things is that, again, if the high schoolers are sticking with plant-based weed, this is the weed that they're getting literally down the street, which is kind of hilarious for people that aren't living here. Scary for us. But then when you get into the edibles, concentrates, vaping, I think vape pens were one of the popular follow-up questions, so we'll make sure that we spend some time on that for it. If you're Googling things or you just like to watch ESPN, then on this one, that CBD kind of thing is, know that acronym, because Nate Diaz, the fighter, was vaping in his after-fight conference, and he's like
yesterday and said it was
all
CBD.
And it's just CBD, and it's for the inflammation and stuff like that. And that's my favorite, is when they put the stuff like that. Interesting if we could test it. So there we are for that. So this is just for you, since what to expect. Back to the Lancet study, and this is what we're seeing in treatment. And this is sort of what we can tell you anecdotally, coming from an inpatient treatment facility here at the hospital, is that when people are using, and they're using pretty frequently, that daily use, and 10 milligrams is a daily use?
They actually did it by frequency. So they did it by 5 times weekly.
Okay.
And they allowed people to determine what a one-time use was. It's really difficult to measure that out. I mean, you're never going to get IRB approval to tell somebody they can smoke.
Yeah.
Like, you can smoke 3/4 of a gram. And so what they defined as a use, so typically it's a joint or so. So 5 times a week was what they considered daily. That's an increase in psychosis associated with a 5-fold. This is 16% THC. Weekend use, which was twice a week, they saw an increase that was 3-fold in diagnosed psychosis. And 1/4 of all of the cases in the study totally isolated down to THC consumption alone. And so this is a huge deal. This is the highest potency that we have ever researched. This is 16% THC, which is full-on ditchweed in Colorado. Like, it's just the lowest that you would find anywhere here, and we are seeing increases in rates of psychosis that are, yeah, like this would be totally triggering a public health crisis if this were like a marker or a type of paint or something people were using in a car or something. It's pretty scary stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I think when we talk about it, when we get into it, we're gonna kind of go through, but I think just for what I'm seeing in patient too is that you guys, if you're running the DSM on these individuals and you didn't sort of know what you were dealing with, psychosis would be first on the thought, on the rule outs for diagnostic information. And we have individuals that struggling, we have them for 90 days clean already. One of the the 3 guys actually that have come in within the last month, and weed was their drug of choice, and that's all that they were doing. And they are taking months to clear with continued, what we would say, kind of thought disorders.
And pharmacologic intervention.
And we have psychiatrists on them. We have an addictionologist on them, like as clean as they can live. Literally no caffeine, no tobacco, no nothing, got everything out of their body, and it takes months and months for them to clear. So you saw we just kind of went through, again, the studies that are talking about the, just, I hate to say it, it's just maybe in drama, but like just the devastation that you could see. And we're adding, you know, this is the New Zealand study, and they're adding 5 years to it. So for 30 years, and we're seeing, you know, welfare, unemployment, and just a lack of potential of people from use. And as well that you saw, this is that the childhood stuff and the IQ drops. So.
Hang on, go to the.
Is it?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so one of the things that you get told all the time is, hey man, my uncle turned out just fine. Look, the president got high. Like the last 3 presidents totally got high. Those are exceptions. And when you look at a big, giant data set like this, which is pretty elegantly teased out, any of you who are interested in that kind of thing, take a look at more than just the abstract here, because it's a really interesting study that they've been doing for a long time. The more weed you smoke, the harder life is. We can make a generalization, and there are exceptions to every single generalization.
Hey, Ben and LaTisha, this is Laura. We had a question come in while you guys are talking about IQ and the New Zealand study. The question is, after use of cannabis is stopped, so once they stop using cannabis, does the IQ score rebound? Does it start coming back?
Not that we have seen yet, but we're only 5 years out. So we'll have to keep an eye on this.
When we're doing testing, our psychologist does testing for a lot of it. We've seen some improvements like in executive functioning, sort of the quick parts of the brain that can kind of rebound, and maybe like processing speed. But when we talk about it, I haven't seen any kind of improvements. And the longitudinal studies, because it's kind of like once it's gone. Well, you can work real hard, I think, with what you have, if you will, because I think that's a part to me that was, I know when Ben sort of got me into this literature, it was, okay, is it structural damage? You know, because I'm part of a generation that, you know, had its fair share of like X and Molly. Like when we do drugs, and they leave holes in your brain, and the meth studies and stuff. And I was like, I was that person. I was like, but it's weed, man. Like, come on. And it's not. And that's what they're talking about, is that it disrupts a lot of the brain development. And that's why we kind of talk about the myelination joke around here. But it really, once you introduce it, there's a whole other study where there's a whole other presentation that Ben does that has, you know, brain structures and lighting up things, and it's just to let you know that it's changing the structure of their brain. It's the way that their brain is developing. So my guess, very uneducated, unresearched guess, is that I don't think you'd get it back. I think you could work real hard with what you have, much like we learn about any kind of like depression or anxiety, bipolar, or structural damage, even from TBIs like concussions and things like that. Because once we do some damage to their brain, it's usually permanent.
Yeah, what you see in this is, so this was last reported in 2012, and we considered, like this was people who stopped consuming it, and I don't remember it exactly, but it was kind of late adolescence, early adulthood, so 16, 17, 18, something like that, and they did not see a return in measurable IQ points, but I would expect another release on this particular cohort in 2017. Because they had been releasing every 5, so we'll keep an eye on it.
Great, thank you. We have another question, and I know you guys are going to get into this later, but just to make sure that you do cover it, as we have about 25 minutes left here. The question is, have you two seen any cases of dabbing? And so I'm sure you're going to get into that when you start talking about oils and concentrates, but I have a follow-up question to that since we were talking about the research. And if you guys can say it, has there been any research done on the concentrates and oils that are starting to pop up in the social use environment?
Skip ahead.
Yeah, let's
right
skip
to that.
So we actually, here you'll see it here.
That's dabbing. There's dabbing.
Just finished a book on this, and when I wrote the dabbing subject, I reached out to a bunch of physicians who I work with on this, all because, of course, there's going to be very little that has come from America all over the world, and asked them what we know about this, and from a scientific presentation standpoint. The best answer I got was actually a colleague at UCH, Dr. Thurstone, and he said, look, here's what you do, man. You say, everything that we know about concentrates and dabbing, and then you leave the next page blank. So we have never studied, a higher potency than 16%. It has not yet been done. The very first looking at concentrates that I'm aware of is being done at the University of Colorado Hospital right now. Actually, a colleague at CeDAR of Dr. Bader's and mine, Dr. Christian Hoffner, is looking at the kind of short and long-term effects of these things. But I'm going to jump back to show you what this is. When you say marijuana to young people, this is what they think of, because the definitions inside of all of the laws tie this to it. It is totally 100% legal in these states that have medicinal and have recreational, because the way that they define it. And in a nutshell, I'll kind of boil it down a little bit oversimplified, but not too oversimplified, is you use some sort of pretty abrasive substance to strip THC out of all of the leaves. Propane, butane, alcohol, even Everclears and things work, but the propane and butane tends to work the best. You force it through. You got to make like a little mini bomb, actually, because it's going to be enclosed. So you force it through it. The liquid that comes out at the end, the more of that liquid that you dissolve out, or purge, they call it, the more potent it gets. So your bottom right here is the shatter, and that is what's going to be your mid-90s to upper 90% THC. And yeah, this stuff is fairly regularly now tipping the scales at 96, 97, even 98%. It's pure THC. So your wax and that's got a little more liquid in it, so that's typically going to be your 60, 70% potency. But this is, and the great, one of my favorite daily reads is something called The Cannabis, which is the Denver Post's daily kind of tribute to all things weed, because they get a lot of advertising money from it, was the guy who runs the company Open Vape, about a month and a half ago, gave us sales figures and showed us how concentrate sales are going to pass flower sales in 2017. So we are fully on course to sell more of this in 2017 in Colorado than we are of the plant. So this isn't fringe use. This isn't something that's outside of the norms. We are seeing people who are initiating on this very regularly, and everyone seems to be graduating to it.
So
I'll take
one second, sorry. So you guys are talking about the concentrates and the waxes. Can you explain for the listeners, so Ben was explaining how you create the shatter or the wax, but can you also explain what dabbing is?
Yeah, so I'll do that. You'll hear it. Ben laughs at my naivete. So if you are a visual learner and you want to know how to cook it all the way to use it, dabumentary is a way to start. If you got about 10 or 12 minutes, then you'll get to see everything in person and kind of get the understanding of it. But for me, so think about like crack pipes. So you've got to get into hard use now. So this, a lot of this.
I have to go back. Dabbing's just the verb.
Yeah.
So if I understand the question correctly, like dabbing is just the verb that talks about the consumption of what we're staring at right now. Sorry, go ahead.
So what you can do is get these products into your body in a couple different ways. So, but it has to heat up to 700 to 900 degrees. So this this, what you see in front of you, actually has to combust.
You can't roll that in a joint.
Right. And you can't, like, this was kind of my joke. I'm like, oh, so you, like, lick it, or you eat it, or you, no. This, think about the fact that what you see in front of you, you can have the oils and you can ingest those, but anything else, the crack, the shatter, the butter, all of that, you have to combust it in order to. And so that's how we kind of talk about, this is mine, get on YouTube, it's okay. If you've never used it in your world, that's how I kind of came from it. Just get on there and scare yourself to death. But what we're doing, I kind of joke, is like the etiquette would be like vaping. That would be maybe how you would do it on the streets or maybe in somebody's house, and you have a little bit more respect. You have a vape pen, and it would combust.
I
don't know. So so the other way to do it is to use kind of like a bong, like a glass device.
I'm just
paraphernalia. Shut up. He's gonna, like, you have to put a butane lighter to a glass crack pipe and smoke this stuff in your face. Like,
that's why she's a doctor.
That's why I'm a doctor.
And she has a much nicer house and a better life because she has this beautiful, like,
it's scary.
You hot knife it. You smoke it like you smoke meth and crack. You hot knife it. For those of you out there nodding right now when I say hot knife, like,
you get it.
Call your sponsor at the end of this, or
think spoons, think dirty spoons, think crack pipes, or that you can get to a place that if you want to, these are kind of edibles, don't worry. This is how you can cook with it. We're going to go through, because this would be the way I think, well, and I turn to Ben, and I kind of joke because in Colorado, they're beautiful. There's actually artistry in some of this stuff that's walking the streets. But once it gets in, once that oil or shatter gets into, once the oil actually gets into these vape pens, you can kind of walk the street with them.
Oh yeah, you can. So this is a real implication for all of you out there. Our program is tobacco free. Which means there's no vaporizing. Everything you're looking at right now are vaporizers that are specifically designed to combust concentrates. So with the edibles that we just scrolled through, we're going to...
You can put them in your backpack. You can put them in your... People have them in their purse at work, literally.
You can eat this, they can pull one out. If someone were standing right in front of you and took a hit from one of these, you would smell it. If someone walked to the bathroom and hid this and then walked out, you would not. So the smell lingers for a short period, if very short, like a matter of seconds, and it dissipates. But it has just made the consumption of THC and THC-derived products glamorous and simple.
I think that's the part, like, whoever's asking the questions, and I think that's the part where Ben laughs at me, because this is not sitting in your house and, like, with butane lighters and right. like not cool use. We're talking, these are like, it's a true story, like bedazzled vape pens that are walking the streets. They're getting pulled out. I literally sat next to a person at the stoplight right by King Soopers here, like our grocery store, with my newborn in the car, like watching somebody smoke from a vape pen, like a bedazzled, gorgeous vape pen. It probably costs, what, $200 around here.
Yeah,
they're very expensive. And it was like that. So think odorless. You can actually put cartridges in there to have them smell differently too. If you'd like, if you know,
put
you're
flower scents in.
Piss your cousin off whenever you come to smoke at their house, you could actually make it vanilla or any other, you know, ocean fresh scent.
And super stealth too. You know, they can look like lipstick containers, pens, pencils. So
highlighters.
Yep, students chewing on them in the back of the class can be doing it very simply. A vaporizer that looks like an asthma inhaler. This is all the norm. So I really appreciate the person who asked the question about concentrates, and would encourage all of you to just, as we move on past this, to give you some ideas for practical application and interventions with people. Do some real research on this, because it is becoming synonymous with what marijuana is for this younger generation, and anybody over 30 typically doesn't even think about it. So keep looking at this.
I'm going to do my other thing too, because we kind of talk about, and I'll probably belabor the point too, but when like people are coming to town, that's when we talk about the culture of addiction. I wanted to give you that stark contrast. You know, it's the difference of like crack pipes and butane lighters and doing all that and sitting on the couch, and these are not the same people, because people are coming to Colorado. It's a classier experience these days. You can go and take one of your dignitary friends, which Ben actually did, into a dispensary, which he actually did, and you can, have a
use our credit card.
Use a credit card, which he did, which is illegal, and get, a little chocolate or a sucker for the go, and or a little bit of oil, and kind of just walk out. And you're in your suit and tie, and you're doing your thing. And when people are coming to town, that's actually how I know a lot more of like mid-20s, 30s, and above. People are first-time users in their 50s and 60s that are coming here to town and vacationing. It's not the same culture, and I think you can probably hear it in my voice, is just start asking about use, because you can't often use the same motivational interviewing techniques anymore, because it's not stigmatized.
They don't even consider it use. Admissions rolls up underneath me at CeDAR, and we've got to change the way that we ask about THC use, because, well, when we ask about drugs, we have people who don't even mention that, and then they come in, and of course we find it out pretty quickly. But it's something that a lot of folks aren't even considering use anymore, because, and again, this is, it took a big chapter to discuss this whole thing, the how and the why, and but like, this is a long game by the people who sell this stuff. All right, this is all you.
Laura, I'll do that. Do you have any more questions on that before we get into it, of kind of like how to use?
No, I think you guys covered it. I think, yeah, that was an important correlation when you guys are talking about the plant and switching over to the oil, and more of what you're seeing and what our listeners might be seeing on their respective campuses or within their sport organizations. So that was great. And if you're connecting it to athletic performance right now, that's perfect as well.
Yeah. So we did that. I just pulled this because we have a guy who actually owns a Denver gym. I'll out his name. Clifford Drew. I can't ever do it. Clifford. He's a 39-year-old. He's one of our triathletes in town. He actually runs a fitness conditioning gym and everything, and has put out a lot of men's journal articles, and is really a proponent around here for
training stoned.
Training stoned, getting high and getting strong are some of the articles that come out around here. They actually will start, gyms and do a proponent, and one of the ways they actually have a recipe in here for a marijuana energy bar, and so it's like 20 milligrams, which is 2 daily servings. So, but you're already 2 times the daily serving, and you put it in your energy bar. And he says, so before he starts, he gets up to train at 3 a.m. very glamorous. And then he'll have his energy bar, and by the time it kicks in, about 30 minutes later, he's into the pool, into his bike ride, into his run. And he says, when I get high, I train smarter and I focus on form. Some of the quotable quotes that we've gotten is, endurance athletes around here are well known now for training high, because they can, just get lost in the moment and train for longer without pain. It alleviates pain, that decreasing nausea, and just improves mood, and they're kind of talking about it. And again, we talk about studies that are out there, and this is the part, I know I sit across from really high-achieving athletes, just human beings all day long, and what we've been able to do, at least at CeDAR, is to use metabolic testing. That's been actually our foot in the door. Dr. Austin and myself get to run groups all day long and kind of try to change hearts and minds for that part. And what you see in front of you is what the research is giving us: the slowed reaction times, problems with motor coordination, hand-eye coordination. All of this you can count on is that they're finding it with each and every study that happens. It's tough for breathing. We actually have the reactive airway disease was an athlete that came in and had a constant cough the whole time until he got sober. So you see what's in front of you, and I know at the conference we sat on this slide for a little bit, because this is the part that you're going to talk to them about, are the effects of it. And for whatever medicinal stuff is coming out with the CBD, and that's what they're going to try. They're going to talk to you about kind of recovery time and the medicinal effects of it, It alleviates pain,
Everything,
nausea,
swelling.
and that it can help. But each and every time that they smoke, the effects can last for 24 to 36 hours.
And my
Or
answer to
smoke,
that is
edibles, anything.
it's all pretty simple with that. You know, yes, it does have the CBD at least has some minor swelling aid in it, but really like ibuprofen works better. Hydrating works better after a workout. You know, the amount of time and energy and money that have gone into optimizing athletic performance from a supplement standpoint. We take supplements that don't have all sorts of kind of intense downsides associated with them. And so here are some of the quantifiable downsides to pass along. And anything that they're using it for, more than likely there's something that is processed safely, FDA approved, that'll do it a little bit better.
And I mean, if you guys have been watching the Olympics, any little thing to get a better performance is where they go. With the cupping that you've seen all the way throughout the Olympics, they're just trying to get that tiny edge, and that's the difference. It's splits of, it's fractions of seconds. It's 5 pounds here or 10 pounds there for weightlifting and strength, and this is the detriment. So you put this in your body, and those little extra bits that make you a champion are gone. It came out too quickly for us to put up here, but if you look for ESPN.com has a special section. It came out for Monday, September the 6th. No, was this? Yeah. So it just kind of came out, and again, when I Googled up the most recent articles, is that ESPN did drugs and sports. And so ESPN, again, athletes love to read it, but it's that skill impairment reduces a capacity, just that fatigue. And if you're trying for repeat sprintability and peak performance over and over, this is where you're going to see just chronic use or even weekend use is going to be a difficult thing to overcome.
Pre-workout would be an issue pre-workout.
Absolutely. So this is, I'm going to just take a second. This is a quick and dirty way. If you've never learned to ask about drugs, and I'm sure Ben will laugh because although my naivete in using drugs comes with many, many years of asking about drugs. And so this is one of my favorites, is that if you can only remember 4 letters, this is how to ask. Have you ever felt that you should cut down? Or has a coach, a trainer, your mom ever thought you should cut down? Has anybody been annoyed or criticized your use? Have you ever felt bad or guilty? And have you ever used drugs to ease withdrawal? Or they talk about eye openers when it comes to alcohol. This is a cage questionnaire. It's a great way to start the conversation and to just start asking. And we do it, so these are valid, reliable measures that you see. The SASE, the ASI is what we use all the time for CeDAR. It gets a full lifetime history as well as the last 6 months of use kind of quantified. And it has legal stuff. It has everything that you would want to know about drugs and alcohol. So if you want your counselors or yourself to be trained on a measure, it's a paper pencil kind of thing, so you can put it into your charts and you can track the intensity of the addiction. But I think for mine, this is that elevator, like know your 2-minute talk. Ben's keeping me on time for that. Is know what your town is saying, know what your school is saying. There's even, banter from the NCAA is, should we test for it? Should we not? The IOC doesn't. I mean, people have won gold medals and tested hot. That was one of our snowboarder guys that tested hot. It doesn't matter to me what the governing bodies say. It helps a lot when we can say illegal and we can say banned. You can still use that. Around here in Colorado, we don't get to use those words anymore, and so a lot of people are walking the streets and we're having to change how we talk to them. So it's knowing the consequences of use, whether it's IQ, whether it's health, whether it's culture, whether it's why on earth would you have edibles in your pantry because your dog can eat them, or your 2-year-old thinks that cookie looks phenomenal. Accidental ingestions for that is just to know your talk and set your expectations. Again, know your 2-minute talk, and they'll probably zone out after 30 seconds. But just sort of know how dangerous it is, and find, you guys do this all day long. Whoever I'm talking to in kind of cyberland is, you're trying to have conversations to enhance people's performance all day long. And every now and then, just a fraction of of a second, a couple IQ points can keep you eligible and keep you happy. And when Ben and I talk about it, he says, like, if you're worried about mood and your people are talking about that it enhances their mood, they have resources that actually you can get medications that will directly improve your mood. If it's about inflammation, then right, a trip to Walgreens is much more successful than using this drug in particular, and to try to get your body back into shape. So as you can tell, I'm going to stop because I have a whole diatribe, and I'll stop that one. Know your culture. Start asking kids, if you have kids, adults, people in your area, if you have a pretty open and transparent, authentic relationship with them, ask what's going on in your world, because you'll start to get a better idea of like each age group, each age bracket, and how they're using and what they're using, and if there's still any stigma around it. I joke, but I tell a true story, is when a kid was going home for Christmas, we called it Cannabis Christmas Story, and he allowed me to share it, and he kind of ran in before the semester was over, and he was like, all right, I got my safety plan, I got my sponsor, I got my home meetings, everything like that. I don't know what to do about my Nana. And I'm like, I'm listening. And he said, because there'll be a box underneath the Christmas tree, and she would have saved all semester while I was playing ball, and she would have gone out and gotten the best weed that she possibly could. And so he said, so what's the safety plan for Cannabis Christmas? Because to say no to the drugs and not to my grandmother, how do I have that conversation? So those are the parts that you'll get into, and you'll understand the refusal skills that it takes, and you'll understand the culture of recovery that it's difficult to make. I'm super proud to say CU, shout out for CU CRC, we have a recovery dorm, we have a recovery program on campus, and it is thriving. So people do want to live sober lives. It just needs to be as cool, it needs to look as cool as the people that are using. So just know that you're a part of this team wherever you're at. If you're an administrator, if you're a trainer, a coach, a teammate, a treatment provider, a sports psychologist, a really educated, that's why I joked because we call them sexy outside speakers when I came in for training, because you're like, oh my gosh, I tell this story every day, how come the kids won't listen? Oh my gosh, let's go hire a sexy outside speaker, because if somebody else says it, then they'll listen. So he is thumping me as I say it, but Ben is for hire as the sexy outside speaker, as well as myself. I get away from campus and we have a good time just to tell people the truth. And he's reached a lot of college kids, a lot of adults, a lot of adolescents, just talking the talk. So sometimes if you need reinforcements, call us. We can tell you true treatment stories, and we can even bring some athletes around to tell you sober stories.
Heavy emphasis on the sexy part. We'll like wear whatever. Anything.
Ben is only saying that for himself.
See what she wears.
So referral for treatment is out there. CeDAR is there. We have an ascent track. I think we're actually going to come in on time. And if you want to learn more, that's Project Sam when Ben's doing his like third job. He's part of that approach, and they are gangbusters. They are fighting the good fight even here in Colorado. We're trying to change things legally already many, many times, and it gets rejected. But donate to Project Sam, help us fight the good fight. And then, I plugged it, sorry guys. First time, I said look for the book. It's called Stirring the Pot, a book about weed, so that whenever you Google it, it's by Ben Cort. I call it an airport read. It's really, that means it's really, really educational, and you can take off in a plane in about an hour and a half or 2 hour flight and finish it. I don't know how about you guys, but I have a lot to read, and so it's a readable book. I'm already getting to read the backstory. So stay current. This is the way to do it. Follow.
It's not until like October.
You guys are semester starting back anyway. You're busy, but it's one of those things. Stay current. Know what your culture is, and
give us a call.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you both for that. That was great. We have one follow-up question related to RMR. I think LaTisha, you mentioned that. They want to know, did the rates for resting metabolic rate decrease or increase? Do you know that?
I can't really make you out, Laura. Try it again.
I'm sorry. So the question was, you mentioned resting metabolic rate, RMR. and they're wondering for a clarification, did those rates increase or decrease?
Their ability to process, so lactic acid is the one where it kind of builds up and to clear it, and whenever we had the athletes retest at the end, they were metabolically much more efficient so that they could use the fuel in their body efficiently, and they had much, they call it repeat sprintability. We just threw some numbers out, like the last athlete that came through in, we only kept him for 60-something days because he had to get back to work, is he had like a 37% increase in his bench, a 28% increase in his squats. We kept a hockey player for a while. We got to have him for 90 days, and he actually had a 300% increase. I say that looked like he could do nothing when he got in there, and he was almost fit as a fiddle when he left. So the body becomes much more efficient really actually quickly. So you can say that for kind of a message of hope as well. They don't have to stay in treatment for forever, and they don't have to stay sober to see results really quickly, as you can actually see the body is resilient. And so once you get those toxins out of the body, even though marijuana stays in the body for a while, that's a whole kind of fake in the UAs, but it stays in the body for a while, but we see a lot of good recovery.
Great.
So that was an answer.
Yep, thank you. A couple of things I will mention for those of you still on the call. I'll just reiterate the resources they mentioned. Project SAM, Smart Approaches for Marijuana, is an excellent resource for those of you looking for resources on campus, additional information, and that is something that Ben's been a part of, and it's just a fabulous website, so I do recommend checking that out for your continuing education. Continuing education certificates, for those of you on the call looking for that, those will be sent out by Friday of this week. If for some reason you don't receive them, please do give me an email, and we'll follow up with that. We will also try and follow up to provide some PowerPoint slides for continuing education as well, so you can follow along for future recordings. This is the first of several webinars that Drug Free Sport will be hosting. We have another one coming up in September with NCAA Sports Science Institute Associate Director Mary Wilfert, and we'll be discussing dietary supplements, whether they are permissible or banned or able for direct distribution to athletes. So feel free to register for that, September 14th. Thanks so much for your attention today, and thank you to our speakers, Ben and LaTisha, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thank you so much.